Today we're going to be working on a Mr. Christmas Stanley Steemer. So, this is what it looks like from the side. Wheels turn. They're supposed to, but there's no resistance, so I think something's broke. Here's the other side. Now, this thing's old. This is 2000 when it was made. Here's the original box. Real smoke, turning wheels, and animated figures are synchronized to the tempo of the 13 Great Christmas Carols. So, alrighty. Well, it doesn't work, hence the reason it's here. Now, this was made in 2000, so it's 23 years old. And you can tell the paints, the metallic paint's starting to come off. The Arizona heat isn't kind to a lot of these things. So it's plugged in. Where's the power switch? Find a plug. I don't know if you can hear the motor for a second and then it stopped. I don't know if you can hear that. It sounds like it's dying. The music works though. And the sound effects of the truck. Now this also, the wheels jerked when I turned it off. One of the features of this is you add train smoke to this and it blows smoke to imitate the steam of an old Stanley steamer. So, there's not too many of the original Stanley steamers around. Most people associate Stanley Steemer with the carpet cleaning company, but they built cars for the longest time. Steam cars, as you can tell. So let's open this up and see what's going on inside. So on the bottom we got 6 screws. So I'm just going to set her down. So they're in the 4 corners and then 2 in the center. So maybe it's got a broken belt, maybe it's got a broken gear, maybe it's got a bad motor, maybe it's all sorts of stuff. The last Mr. Christmas I did, almost the entire gearbox was broken. So, you never know. But this is kind of a cool looking piece. I'm not a Christmas kind of person for Christmas things, miniature houses and stuff. But this is a cool piece, only because I do like the Stanley Steemers. I've seen 1 or 2 at car shows in my lifetime, and I know Jay Leno has one that he drives around every once in a while, and it's kind of a cool throwback to the old days when we had steam engines for not just ships, but trains and cars. It just shows you the power of steam. Alright. The bottom just comes completely off. There's nothing attached to it, which is nice. And I'm going to flip her over so you can see. We got a circuit board. And in the center we have a motor. We have, it looks like an eccentric above the motor, which gives it the rocking motion this is supposed to have. So, and that's all I can see at the moment. So we're going to turn it on sideways. And I'm going to try and see if I can verify the motor is actually turning. So I'm going to get on some magnifiers here. And we're going to plug it back in. And in case you didn't know, this is a 6-volt DC unit. In case you have one and you're missing your adapter. It's 6 volts DC. I know a lot of stuff out there is AC. This one is not. Alright, magnifiers on, and looks like the mechanism isn't turning. It looks like the belt tried to turn. I think the belt's broke. It's hard to see. It's maybe 1.5 inches below that oval ring with 4 screws. I don't think any... Yeah, all the mounting's right here in the center, so you shouldn't have to remove the circuit board. unless you want to check the circuit board for damage, corrosion, or replacing a component that may or may not be replaceable. So it looks like this oval ring with the 4 screws is the main part that holds the steamer on. So let's start there. So I'm wondering if there's a motor inside the wheels, a small one, that makes these turn, or if it's supposed to have a belt or a gear. This is, to me, kind of reminiscent of some of the Enescos. I know it's not an Enesco product and there's no relation, but it's kind of a style they would have, like with their rocking train car music box, and that horrible one to repair, the Puff the Magic Dragon music box. So, ring's off. This is a captive ring in the sense that it's got the wires around it. I can't. Unless that's one of the magicians that could slide it through. It's not going to happen. Alright. This is spinning on something. It feels like it's broke on the inside. I can't tell you what it is because I haven't taken it apart. I'm going to hold this off the ground or off the bench. Yeah, it feels like the shaft is broke inside, like the gear it's attached to, or pulley. Alright, so next step. It has a belt that runs the rear axle. That's kind of neat. The front axle is encased in this plastic, so I can't tell. There's an actual little belt that's coming out, going through this pumpkin and going back in. So that's kind of cool. This black pan appears to be held on with 4 screws. So let's take the black pan off. This screw apparently isn't all the way out, or it caught. There we go. Wow, that is interesting. So the front is done by a belt, and I'm guaranteeing the front wheels don't spin because the belt's bad. It's really stretched. The back belt is also pretty stretched. This thing's got a lot of belts. There's 4? 5? 4. 4 belts. Whole bunch of pulleys. Not as many gears as normal. This is more of a belt-driven unit. I'm going to try and show you. That's going to be the harder part of this process, is trying to show you this without cutting all the wires. But I don't even know how to take the belts off. Well, that belt comes off pretty easy. That belt's captive. Huh. Interesting. All right. Let's try and get these screws out so I don't lose them. Looks like all the screws are pretty much the same. How are we going to do this? So the wires that go up right here, they go up to this, which is your steamer. And we got the wires that go to the motor. Circuit board will not fit through the hole. Alright. Let's turn it on. I want to see if the motor is actually turning and it's just a whole bunch of bad belts. Yeah, the motor's spinning beautifully. Or is it? Nope, motor's pulsating. It's bad. There we go. Now it's spinning. Spinning horribly. I don't know if it's supposed to do that or not. Maybe the... No, it shouldn't. The gyration should be done by the eccentric. The motor is hesitating, then spins, and hesitating, then spins. But it's not turning any of the mechanism because the belt is bad. This belt here. So I'm going to see if I can tip her over a little. Get you an idea what I'm looking at. So here's the front axle, which this belt is super loose. Here's the rear axle, which is super loose. Here's the transfer that goes from the main drive here to the rear axle, which is super loose. Here's the main belt, which is also super loose, and it's not turning anything. We have a small gearbox right in here, which you can kind of see right there. Where if I start turning, you can see the rear wheels are trying to go. I'm trying to hold this up without touching any of the moving parts with my hands or resting it on anything, so I can try and manipulate this by hand. Let's see. Could just be a bad motor, but what I'm doing by rotating it is I'm checking the gears. I'm looking for a broken gear, because broken gears are very common, especially on something that's 23 years old. It's all lumpy. I'm thinking it's got a bad motor. I'm turning the motor at the same time I'm doing this. Gears look okay, surprisingly. I'm actually quite impressed. The gears are good, but this thing needs a whole bunch of belts. So how do we replace them all? And I think it's going to need a motor. And that's a 6-volt motor, which I should have one right here. Yeah. All right. I'm marking that with the black because this is a black and green wire, and that one's the black. Probably because it's using, well, so it's the correct polarity, so the wheels spin forward and not backwards. So I'm marking it because I'm most likely going to have to desolder the motor so I can get this whole thing apart. Because if you notice, the wires for the steamer, quote unquote, they're loose, but the motor wire is taut, and that's what's holding this together where it's at an angle. If I can move it. So I'm going to desolder these wires. That way I can get to removing all these screws, so we can change all these belts and then get a closer inspection of the gears. The gears all look good using my magnifiers and spinning it by hand. I don't see any cracks, and I don't feel the clunk or the pause. I'm thinking this just needs a whole new set of belts and possibly a new motor. All right, soldering iron's now up to temperature. And we'll use some fresh solder to desolder. This allows for penetration of heat. So like that. And like that. So if you have to desolder something, you can either sometimes use flux or just fresh solder, and it'll help with its release because it allows the heat transfer to be more efficient. But now I have more play. Now you can see it a little bit better. I can rotate it almost 180 degrees from its upright position. There's some overgluing right there. You have to disassemble this rear pumpkin to change this belt. That's interesting. And this, pretty much the same thing. You have to disassemble this whole shaft to change this belt. But I mean, how much play is in this thing? It's ridiculous. So first things first, let's remove the gearbox. Which appears to be held in with just 3 screws. Oh, 4. I didn't see the one behind the motor here. 4 screws. There we go. Alright, now it is stuck on the mechanism. This mechanism. So I'm going to have to unscrew these 2 screws. Stay in your slot, thank you. Ah, the front wheels turn left and right as well as rotate. That's pretty cool. That's what this mechanism is, a steering mechanism. Still stuck on the mechanism. Now it's stuck on the bottom of the mechanism. So how are you supposed to get to that screw? That screw's pointing up. Unless it's just pressed on. If it is, I still don't know how they pressed it on upside down. No. Stuck on the shaft that makes Santa twist. That's why it says animated characters. It's a little shaft that makes Santa move back and forth. Okay. Is there a way to do this without taking that off? Possibly. So there's the drive belt. Since I have the belt disconnected and I have the main circuit board disconnected, I'm going to send 6 volts DC power to the motor and see if it actually spins like it's supposed to, instead of that weird vibrating thing. Yeah, it's spinning like it's supposed to. And if I put a load on it, it goes, with no load, it's not even negligible on amperage draw. Let me put it exactly at 6 volts on my machine. So the amperage draw is 0.00, which means it's really efficient for a motor. So now I'm going to put my finger on it and start slowing it down, and with it almost trying to grind my pinky off, it's at 1/4 of an amp. So this motor is pretty healthy, it's not jerking. So I think the problem's the belt. Belts, plural. I don't feel like breaking the pressed on shaft. I'm not sure if I have to pop Santa off or if there's a way to pop it off down here. But since I can remove this belt without taking any more off, I'm going to see if I can remove the rest of the belts without disassembling this whole gearbox. Unless one of these gears is broke. So the next belt would be this one, which is very easy to get to. Just slides off like so. Hopefully I have some big bolts. So in this kit, they send some of these really long belts that don't work for a lot of things, but I think they're going to work for this. I might have a couple of bigger belts. If your belts are too short and you stretch them, sometimes it puts too much stress on it and quits turning. So you want to make sure that you do have close to the right length. I'll pop open another kit just to make sure I have more belts handy. Another kit. I do have a random assortment of loose belts. So now, next step is how do we take the belt off of this pulley here and this pumpkin here. So I have a funny feeling we're going to have to remove this front axle assembly. Or one of these wheels. Are they screwed on? No. Because I can remove it from the inside pulley with tweezers or thin needle nose pliers. Like that. So I can remove it from there, just like I can do that to this one here, like so. But how do you remove it from this pulley? Now, this doesn't come out, I'm pulling, and it's attached to something. There's no screws, so it's probably pressed in. There's a little bit of a gap on this axle. Maybe I can slide a spudger in there and slide the wheel off. The other side does not have a gap. Nope. It does have a small gap. Let's see, can I try and spudger on this side? No. Now, there are screws that hold the pumpkin together. One screw. 2 screw. All right. The whole top of this car has to come off. There's 3 standoffs that hold this axle in place in the center. 2 are attached to the back of the pump and one's attached to the front. And this has a screw coming down from up here. This whole top should come off. There's 1, 2, 3. There is a lot of screws that go through to the top. So I guess we're just going to start taking screws off and seeing if we can get this thing to come apart. I need to be able to pop these axles down to get these belts changed. Oh my lord, these screws are tight. Holy smokes. Wow. Trying to figure out which screws do what. Screws I'm taking off are just the ones that are going through the pink bottom that aren't recessed into a drilled out hole. So these are the ones that should technically be holding the top of the body together. This one's going to be a problem. This one, the head's bad. I gotta figure out how to get that one out. Let's see if I can. Come on. Too big. Sometimes when you have a stripped out Phillips, you can use a blade or a flathead that'll span the gap enough to break it free, but this screw is just coming apart. don't really have easy outs in this size, and the only other way to do it is to drill it, which can damage the entire unit. Well, let's just see. With the ones I've taken out, do I have any play in the front? No. No, we don't. There's another screw. They sure use a lot of screws. Well, this part will come off if that one screw would come out, but the front steering though, then the nose is loose but it won't pop off, and I don't see any more screws holding it on. This screw looks like it's attached to the steering wheel. Yeah, because this screw, when I turn it, it's turning the steering wheel. These screws are attached to that. They're not attached to the base at all. I really need to get this last screw out. It's like they're anti-tamper screw or something. Too big. Almost. too big. Still too big. I hate to do it, but I might have to drill the head off. I hate to do it because of the vibrations and stuff that's going to go through this unit. Man. There's always one thing that seems to slow the process down. In this case, it's a bad screw. And as soon as I put a screwdriver on it, the head cracked. Probably because it was over torqued when it was put in. Or it was just a defective screw. Yeah, one of the two. But I need to be able to get this axle out, and figure out how to get these off so I can change the belts, and then reassemble. That's the whole point. I don't think there's any screws on the top that we're going to check. Let's see. Will Santa separate? I told you he's pressed on. So I'm wondering if I can pop him off. Nope. 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 Well, there's a couple screws in the top. It holds this together. There's a screw there and a screw there. It holds this piece together for the steamer. And that's where you fill it right there. That hole is for the spout to put the smoke juice in there to give it the steam effect. 40 minutes in, we've diagnosed it, only got half of it torn apart. So, that's awesome. I was hoping to have it back together by now. There's got to be a trick. They didn't just magically make this thing appear assembled. Looks like the axles are just pressed in. Unless it's the paint that's holding it. I got some movement. I think it might just be the paint that's holding this together. I went from a very small gap to now I can fit 2 spudgers in here. So I've increased the size of the gap by 50%. No, it's just flexing the plastic. Damn it. Hasn't moved at all. It's flexing this white nylon. It looks like it's moving, but what it's doing is it's taking these two ends and squeezing them together by me prying up here. So that's not working. I'm going to try and wedge it down here and try prying again. So let me get my spudger there, wedge this, see if I can get some motion. Nope. Since I got the gearbox down, I'm double checking the gears real fast. Might as well do something productive. Alright, all the gears appear to be fine. See, on a real car, you disconnect the bolts for the pumpkin pops off, you can access it. But this one has got 3 screws coming from the top to hold it in place. So that way it, you know, stays solid. Guess I'll try the rear wheel real fast. Since it's a different assembly, maybe it'll pop off or show me some motion. Nope, it's flexing the pumpkin. It's causing the pumpkin to bulge. Alright, since we're approaching 45 minutes here, I'm going to pause it for a moment and I'm going to sit here and try and figure out and see if I can get that one screw out that's bad. Once I get that screw out, maybe the top will come off and I can drop the axle assemblies from the top. Maybe. Can't guarantee it. Also, I might be able to figure out how to drop this gearbox since it also has a screw coming in from the top. I don't understand how they put this thing together. I'm assuming they assembled everything to the lower chassis, then screwed the top on, meaning where Santa sits and all this here. I'm assuming. I don't know. And I can't see any screws unless they're painted over that hold it together from the top. There's no indications of any painted over screws. The only screws I can see on the top are the 2 that hold the casing on for the steamer. So, all right, one moment please while I see if I can figure out what's going on. Okay, I got the rear axle out. I can't get the top off and I still cannot get that screw up. But the rear axle is able to flex the pumpkin enough to get it to slide out. And then here's the new belt. The old belt's right here. So I can't get these wheels to come off, so I think this is how it comes apart, is that needs to come apart, and then I still don't know how to get that belt over the plastic alignment piece. But so new belt. Now feeding it back through is going to be a treat. I hooked it up because I added the black belt tension was too much for the pulley here, so I went through my belts and I found a blue belt. You can probably see it right there. The black belts are either too long or too short. So I put a blue belt on it and then put this belt on and screwed it to make sure that this would spin and not pull or bind. If your belt's too short and you stretch it, it can actually put too much stress on your pulleys and wedge them. So I was just verifying that was good. I also reconnected the steering box to make sure that the gear actually would make it steer. So the only thing that doesn't work is this front belt at the moment. Well, and of course the rear axle's in my hand. So let's see if I can get this back in and hooked up, and then we got to figure out this front axle still. I got tired of screwing around the front axle, so I said I'm going to screw around the back axle and see if I can flex it. So there is, at least on this one, enough flex to get it out. Now is there going to be enough flex to get it in? Getting it out is always easier than putting it back in, just because of the shape of the components. Because they're rounded on the inside and the pulley's round, it's going to try and use it as a spreader or a wedge, whereas pushing it back in, it's trying to do the opposite. I need to get the pulley in first, or at least started. And kind of get it to... This is tough on the fingers, I'm not going to lie, because this plastic is pinching. And it slid. Almost. There we go. All right, so the pulley started. You can kind of see that groove. Yeah, it's a little stressful on your skin. So now I just need to walk it into its position by walking it past the standoffs. Oh, and forgot about the belt. Belt's supposed to go in with the pulley. So, see if I can get the belt in without taking it all back apart. I might be able to. Trying to get the belt to stay up so I get it on the other side of the screw standoff when it drops in. It should drop in here in just a second like that. Now I just need to get it on the other side of the screw standoff piece. And then I gotta feed it through the hole and feed it through or over the pulley. Alright, so it's out of the hole. Now let's see if I can get it onto the axle's pulley. So that's going to be the hard part. also need to get the bushing for the this white bushing on this side fell in, so I'm trying to, it's fighting the uphill battle, so I'm trying to reduce the amount of gravity by changing the angle. Let's see if I can get it to slide into place, or do I have to pull it out? I have to pull it out. I can't bypass the screw piece. That. And maybe while I have it up, I can get the pulley on. So make sure your bushing is all the way out. It fell in when I was pushing it in. Come on, get on the pulley. Alright, belt's on the pulley on the pumpkin. I'm going to put it on the pulley on the drive mechanism so it stays under tension, and then I'm going to get the axle put back in completely. This way the belt is less likely to fall off when I get the rest of this thing assembled. There we go. Like that. All right, well, that was an absolute pain. Let's put the two pumpkin screws back in and give it a little test. And one of my axle bushings already came out of place. There we go. We'll use that. And let's try it. See if this thing spins like it's supposed to. And we just got to figure out the front. That. So we're getting there. Santa's turning too. See? Look at that. So now we just got to get the front pulley figured out. I'm trying to figure out what's clicking. Oh, there is a broken gear. Look at that. This shaft right here that's spinning, the gear that's pressed through is actually snapped. Couldn't see it because when it's not under tension, it closes. Yeah, it closes right up. So I do have a broken gear, and we have 4 bad belts, which 3 are now replaced. So we got to figure out how to get number 4 on, so we can get the front wheels to spin, and then figure out how to take this thing apart to replace that busted gear. Making progress. Did not anticipate this one to be as difficult as it is. I figured they would have made it relatively simplistic to work on, since usually Mr. Christmas you take out all the screws and you're good to go. But this one is a little different. So we now have the steering, the main drive, the rear wheels fixed. Now we just got to fix the broken gear and the front drive. Solder the wires back on, and the reason I was having so many problems when I said it was gyrating, if it's the power coming out of here, that's a bad circuit board, but I think it's because it's been slipping on the belts. So, yeah, so we're getting there. Not fast, but we're getting there. I'm wondering if I can just pull this shaft out. Hey, look at that. Since the gears broke, it's not really going to be held in much. And that shaft fits in that hole there, and I am not sure what it does unless it's just an alignment shaft, which is possible, just to align the mechanism with the base for the rocking. Or that could be the rocking itself. That could be the base of the eccentric that pushes. Guess I should be working on it this way. Everything seems to be falling in the wrong direction. There we go. Because if you have it where Santa's down, all the mechanisms are in the way. If you have it where Santa's up, it's an open drop for any screws or, in this case, the broken gear. You might be able to see the crack where the teeth look a little weird. That's where the crack is. So, need to find a gear, as well as still figure out how to get this front assembly off. And then this shaft is slightly eccentric. You might be able to see that way. See that little nub right there? And that fits into the hole right here. And I'm thinking this slight wobble is what makes the vehicle rock back and forth. Most eccentrics are much larger, and they're usually pressing the base up and down, versus this would be going side to side, which is kind of strange. That's probably why I broke the gear. There seems to be a lot of lateral stress, but it's also 23 years old. All right, so I'm gonna go dig out my gears, see if I have one, and then still figure out how to disassemble the front axle so I can get the belt off, because the belt, I have no idea. The rear one, pain, but was able to figure it out by staring at it for a while. Front one, I'm hoping I can figure it out too, because I can't slide it over because of these. So this axle's got to be pressed together, and I don't want to break the spokes. So anyhow, see what we can figure out. So looks like what this thing needs is a full belt kit and one gear at this point. I'm gonna throw these away so they're not sitting here. And then of course, when it's done, I'll link below where everything comes from. So, all right, I'm gonna pause it again. I'll be back shortly. Okay, after screwing around with the front, once I got the other two, well, once I got all the screws out and it wasn't coming off, I started wiggling it. These are recessed holes that these fit inside of. So the reason it wasn't moving is because I had to walk it up and it popped right off. So there's the single screw I was telling you about. So let's go ahead and take it off. As far as the rest of the truck goes, because I already got the rear axle fixed, I did put in some of the screws that hold it together. So I didn't worry about the one that's broke. There's no point potentially damaging this since it'll make it anymore. So there we go. There's that. And I have to take the steering linkage back off because I put it back on to test the tension on the gear. So let me unscrew the steering linkage. There we go. And voila. Alright, so now we have this part, and here's the problem, is how do I get that off? You know, no matter what I do, this is one solid piece of nylon. So one of these two has to come off. There we go. You might have been able to do this without taking this whole thing apart if you have this piece. So there's that. Now we have to deal with the fact that this still won't slide off because it's stuck. So oh yeah, that's on there pretty good. What I was trying to do was push the pulley down, and if I use a little mechanical advantage. Oh, no. Still got to get this white housing off. Tighten this up real quick. That's loose. There we go. That's better. I would not recommend cutting this because this housing is what the wheels pivot on. It keeps them square. I know that this should just be pressed on. I'm wondering if they glued it on. Alright, I got it to break free. As long as this other wheel doesn't come off, it should hopefully slide off. Let me see if I can push it down now. Oh, still no. That is one tight fit. I am surprised. There we go. And there's that and that. So, technically I wasn't trying to get this to pop all the way off. I just wanted to come halfway so I still have enough room to put the belt on. That's the big belt. I think it's this one here. Yes. So in the Skull Crane kit of belts, it's the second largest belt that does the drive to the axles. The Skull Crane belt will do where I put the blue belt, but the blue belt put less stress on it. And I want to make sure we don't have so much stress that it kinks or bends. Let's get rid of this old belt. That blue belt comes in one of those gear kits that I get. If I still have it, I'll link it below. So there we go. Oh my gosh. That is one of the tightest pressed on pulleys I think I've ever come across. That is insane. So, I guess we'll have to do it just like I took it off, put it back on, or we'll walk it. So, try and equal out the pressure on my palm to where it's mostly in the center. Of course, it just popped out. That way I don't break the spokes. The rubber comes off. I'm just putting it back on. And serious. Man, I love when things want to fight all the time. It just doesn't want to go together like it's supposed to. Okay. Let's see if I can maybe use my bench to help align that axle into the other side. The tire came off. There. There we go. So what happened was that didn't go into its hole, and then when that happened, the belt came out and was on the wrong side of the alignment bars, or the centering bars, or whatever you want to call them. So now let's get this back down all the way. I said you might be able to do this while it's still in the vehicle. Now that I know how it comes apart, one side does come off and the other side doesn't, which is what I was thinking. One side's got glue and the other side is just pressed. Like that. And those. Steering bar is on the wrong side, but instead of unpressing it, I'm going to just unscrew it so I can fix the steering bar because it went to the wrong side. So I'll just unscrew that. And put it back on the right side of the wheel. Forward. Steering linkage is on. Almost. Oh, almost came on and then it slipped right back off like it just did now. Let's try this. This has a finger in it that might make it easier and more easy. Yes. So this spudger has a finger, as you can see, the way easier than this. Should have just done that off the get-go. Alright. And put this back on. I will solder the wires. I'll turn on my soldering iron to get it started so we can do it under its own power. Oh, forgot about the gear. Well, let's just make sure that this works. So we'll do the soldering second. We'll just use the machine because I forgot about the gear. I was too busy figuring out this front end And I got sidetracked from looking for the gear. So, lift it up so it's not touching anything. And it might work for a few seconds here, just for the fact that the gearbox is missing an alignment gear, and it's also not fully attached. So let's see if I can just get this sit for a second. Look at that. Santa's moving. Wheels are spinning. Nice and quiet. Yay. And wheels aren't moving back and forth because this gear not only does the eccentric, it's the connection gear for the steering mechanism. So, all right. So now we're at the last step. Finding a gear, putting it back in, making sure it works, soldering it back together, sticking in the 9,000 screws I've taken out, and hopefully at that point we'll be good. And this can go back to its owner. It hasn't worked in many years, so I think they'll be pretty happy, or he'll be pretty happy that it's fully functional. Yeah. So I'm going to try and find this gear right now, and when I come back, hopefully be fully assembled and ready to go. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the gear in with the pair of needle nose pliers, since the box still isn't attached, and then press this in until it sets into the other side will go into a standoff like that right there, and that should take care of it. So I'm just going to press that in until the gear hits the resistance, which is the knurling, which is right there. It's that dull spot. And then once that's done, I'll screw all the screws in so this is back on and that this is secure like it's supposed to be. Put soldering the wires on, put the whole thing back together, basically reverse order of taking it apart. And then it should be a fully functional Stanley Steemer music box from Mr. Christmas. So I shall return in just a moment. There you go. Santa's moving. See, the wheels are turning and turning. It doesn't spin as fast as I thought it would, because it doesn't send 6 volts to the motor. It pulses the motor. That's what I thought it was doing earlier. It literally pulses the motor. That's how it kind of wiggles or jiggles to the beat of the music. But the truck is rocking. Santa's moving. Wheels are turning. Wheels are spinning. Oh, that stinks. This is hot now. There's nothing in it. Oh yeah, that's what I smell. Whew, like what the hell's burning? That gets hot for the smoke juice. So, I'm going to turn it off so that can cool down, and it doesn't get so hot that it melts this, because there's nothing inside. This is plastic. There's nothing inside to burn. So, I did not put the base on yet. That's why there's still some screws over here. I left this off. This. In case the solder joint broke, or in case I had to disassemble it because it didn't want to work when it was fully assembled. Alright, so what this needed was one gear, which I had, hence the reason it walks, it wobbles. Just like you saw me take it out, kinda. I used the needle nose pliers to slide it in, and I pushed the shaft through, just like I said I was going to. It worked perfectly. The belts all got replaced. You kind of saw, if you have this piece, how to disassemble it. Don't worry about the screws from this point back, just the screws this point forward. If you want to take out these screws, it'll be easier to drop the axle, but there was enough stretch in the axle where it can open to slide the axle out. If you don't want to do that, then remove the rest of the screws and remove this entire housing, but be wary, there are wires going to the burning plate, so you might have to unscrew this to remove this part. But there is a lot of play, so you may not have to. The one's oddball screw, it does hold the steering wheel. I took it off just to try it. All it does is make the steering wheel loose. It's just a loose screw, so the steering wheel wobbles when he turns. Once you do that, one of the two wheels is glued on, so just take the two wheels and twist until one of them breaks, and then walk it out. Walk out the entire assembly, replace the belt, slide it back on, feed it through. The belt, the long belt on this side, that is blue in this case, and the main drive belt, you don't need to really disassemble anything to get to it. But if you lose your spinning motion, you're going to have to disassemble a lot of this. As far as the steering linkage goes, it's on an eccentric gear. It's a really heavy gear, large teeth, extra thick. Hopefully it never breaks, because I have no idea where you can find a new one. You'd probably have to fabric cobble something. But eccentrics, especially I found with Mr. Christmas, they're usually oversized, and they don't tend, I've never seen one break. So, not saying it can't happen, just I haven't seen it yet. As far as this piece goes, it's probably a moderate to disassemble. You're going to need a screwdriver, a couple of them, spudgers, needle nose or tweezers, but I like these because they're long and they're thin. And like I said, I think these come Michaels in their jewelry section, or jewelry needle nose pliers. I just like them because they're super long. You can see that the needle nose part is over 2 inches. So, but other than that, you're going to need belts. I'll link below the gear kit. The gear that I took is in the same gear kit as the belt, the blue belt that I used. So it's one kit. And then the other belts I used come from Skull Crane, which I'll also link below to the kit, which is a variety pack. So this needed 4 belts, 1 gear, and a lot of trouble to take it apart. Other than that, it works. This thing smells horrible. Probably hasn't been used in so long, it's just residue and dust. I probably wouldn't run it long without having something in there to dissipate the heat. The liquid smoke used for trains, as an example, it dissipates the heat from the heating plate. So if there's nothing in here to dissipate the heat, meaning absorb it, this plastic housing is going to start to absorb it, and it's going to burn. The plate's going to discolor, and it's going to possibly discolor the innards, not this outer casing, but the inner casing, that center hole that you see in there. And it's chance of damage, not much. When I used to do trains, my steam engine never had a problem if it had smoke or not, and it didn't care. But it was also metal. It was a die-cast engine, solid metal. There was no real plastic pieces on it except for like the bell. But this, I would be more concerned of it getting too hot. Department 56 has a couple of the wax warmers. Them some bitches get hot enough to melt the plastic. If the wax warmer falls off of its track, like on the one where the oven door opens, it can actually melt the plastic. So they do get hot enough to damage the stuff they're in. Technically they're not supposed to, but if the equipment doesn't work right, there's a chance. It's still low powered. If we're talking 6 volts, I mean, you're not talking a 120 volt oven or a 240 volt oven where you can, melt everything to it. But you just don't want to damage your equipment. So read the instructions. If it says you can run it without the liquid smoke, then you're fine. If it says not to, then don't for long periods. On the wax warmer, same thing. As I said, I worked on a couple of the ovens, and one of them, the track came apart. The screw came out, the track fell. The wax warmer got wedged at an angle, and the heat it generated actually did warp the plastic, and that's because the track's supposed to move back and forth, so that means the heat's moving back and forth, and because it's sitting in one spot, the heat coming up melted the inside of the oven a little. Nothing that affected it in appearance or functionality. It's just something to be aware of. So I don't know about this one. I didn't read the instructions or anything on this part. One thing I did like about my train, as an example, my old Lionel, it had a switch, so I could turn off the heater in here because it would drive faster, because it draws power. So if you turn the heater off, the headlight and the 2 red lights on the front would get brighter and the train would go quicker. Didn't matter even with the heater on, it'd still throw it off the track if you had a curve at full 3 speed. It didn't care. But it was a safety measure put into the train from the manufacturer. I kind of wish stuff like this did it too, because that way you could turn this off and have this run and not worry about the smell, because I wish I could tell you what it smells like. I thought something was on fire in here when I had this thing running, because I had it running for about 2 minutes before I turned on the camera, just so I could check to make sure that my 4 screws aligned with that oval plate, to make sure that the eccentric was in place and there was nothing out of alignment. There was no binding, clacking, clicking, etc. Which it all just drops right in, not a problem. I don't think you'll have an issue if you take it apart. It's actually, once you get 2 of the screws lined up, everything else just fits in perfectly. And the reason I say 2 is because everything's loose, but once you get 2, especially if they're diagonal, everything's squared and it's really fast. So, but there it is. The Stanley Steemer from 2000 from Mr. Christmas. A interesting piece. It was probably a cool piece when it came out, when it was shiny and not flaking. The metal flake paints are great, but I have noticed they have a shorter lifespan than just regular paint. You can see the metal flake paints are peeling, whereas just the regular paint isn't. And even this, which is got some metal in it, is flaking off because it's supposed to be brown. But there is some metal, especially on the edges. You can see the sparkly. So, metal flake paint look cool, but out here, especially in the sun or the heat and storage, it doesn't handle as well as just regular, good old-fashioned paint. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. It's a cool piece. It'd be kind of a piece you'd take apart and sand and then repaint it, and it would look really neat. And you could put it on your display. But other than that, that's it. Hopefully this helped. If you have this piece, I'm going to screw the bottom on now and put it back in its box and let the owner know that his Stanley Steemer is working, so he can display it this Christmas. And I know he has smoke because he also does trains, so he can definitely fill that bad boy up right there and make this thing puff. So until the next one, thanks for watching.